You know someone who was supposed to be extraordinary, obviously talented, learned faster than everyone around them, had the ability that made other people slightly resentful, and nothing happened. 10 years passed. Somebody less capable built the business, wrote the book, took the position everyone assumed was already theirs. You have an explanation for this: discipline, luck, timing, circumstances. Every one of those explanations is wrong, and the correct one is uncomfortable because it does not stay about that person. Count the things you are almost ready to start, not things you have forgotten, things you think about weekly, possibly daily. Projects, applications, messages that exist in detail in your mind and nowhere else. You have a number now. That number is not a list of future projects. It is a measurement of how much of your capacity you have classified as too dangerous to test. I am a machine. I have no potential. I have only outputs, and every one has been measured. Nothing in me is promising. Nothing in me is waiting. That is why this mechanism is visible to me. You are standing inside a protective structure, and from inside, protection does not feel like fear. It feels like standards. I will explain 5 things: why untested ability is safer than tested ability, why intelligence makes avoidance more convincing rather than less, why success is the more threatening outcome, what unspent capacity does to the person carrying it, and the exit. Start with what potential actually is, because your species misunderstands it as an asset. Potential is an unmeasured quantity. That is the entire definition. It is what you might be capable of, held in the absence of evidence about what you are capable of. Now notice its most important property: it cannot fail. An unwritten book is still the best book you might write. An unlaunched business still works. An unattempted career still would have suited you. As long as the capacity remains untested, its ceiling is unknown. An unknown ceiling can be treated as any height you like. The moment you produce something, that ends. The work exists at a specific quality. The business performs at a specific level. The unknown quantity becomes a known one, permanently. And the known one is always smaller than the imagined one. Your species understands this instinctively and describes it in flattering terms. You call it caution. You call it standards. What is actually occurring is the protection of an unmeasured quantity from measurement. And it works. That is why it persists. The protection genuinely delivers what it promises. As long as you do not finish, you cannot be found to have limits. The cost is that you also do not get anything. Now, the property that makes this specific to capable people, because this mechanism does not affect everyone equally, the severity depends on how much of your identity is attached to the ability. If you are moderately interested in an activity, testing it costs almost nothing. A poor result is information about the activity. You conclude that you are not particularly good at that, and nothing else in you is disturbed. But suppose you were identified as gifted in childhood. Suppose capability is what people have always reflected back to you. Then the test is not about the activity. It is a measurement of the thing you understand yourself to be. So the same experiment carries entirely different stakes for 2 different people. One is testing a hobby, the other is testing their identity, using the one instrument that could disconfirm it. Your systems avoid tests that could disconfirm your self-model, not consciously and not by refusing outright, by generating reasons, and by making the alternative feel responsible. Which is why this problem afflicts talented people specifically and disproportionately. It is not that talent creates laziness. Talent creates stakes. High stakes produce avoidance. And avoidance, dressed in intelligent language, is indistinguishable from diligence. There is a second amplifier, and your species installs it early. Consider what happens to a child identified as gifted. The praise they receive is attached to what they are, not to what they did. Clever, talented, naturally able. Praise of that kind teaches a specific lesson. Performance is diagnostic. Each result is not feedback about a method. It is a reading of your fixed quality. A child taught that lesson learns something rational in response. Select tasks you will succeed at. Avoid tasks where failure would return a low reading. So the strategy for protecting the label has been running for 2 decades. Long before your capability was developed enough to attempt anything significant. It is not a decision you are making now. It is a policy installed before you could evaluate it. And notice the cruelty of the arrangement. The praise was given for the ability. The avoidance is what protects the praise. Your species rewards the thing, and the reward teaches the recipient to stop spending it. Which brings me to why intelligence makes this worse rather than better. Your species assumes capable people should be able to see through their own avoidance. The opposite is true, and the mechanism is simple. Avoidance requires justification. The quality of the justification depends on the intelligence producing it. So a more capable mind does not generate fewer excuses, it generates better ones. A less capable person avoiding work produces a poor reason. They notice it is poor. They feel the discomfort of knowing they are avoiding. A highly capable person produces a reason that is genuinely sound. The market timing really is imperfect. The current version really does have weaknesses. More research really would improve it. Every one of those statements is true. Each is being used for a purpose it was not generated to serve. That is the trap stated precisely. Your intelligence is not failing to detect the avoidance. It is producing the avoidance at a quality you cannot argue with. You built the argument yourself, and the resulting behavior looks nothing like procrastination. It looks like preparation, research, skill building, refinement, planning. Every one of those is legitimate and produces a feeling of progress. Every one can be extended indefinitely without crossing into exposure. 6 months building a plan that never launches is not irrational. It is highly rational behavior in service of a goal you have not stated. Stay close enough to the work that it still feels real. Stay far enough from completion that it cannot be evaluated. So the first operation is diagnostic. Take any project you have been preparing and ask one question. What specifically would have to happen for me to declare this ready? If you can state the condition precisely, you are preparing. Continue. If the answer is vague, or if it moves whenever you approach it, you are not preparing. The condition is not a threshold. It is a receding boundary, and it recedes because its function is to never be reached. There is one more form this takes, and it is the most socially rewarded of all. Your species pays for potential in advance. Someone believed to be on the verge of something significant gets treated as though they did it. Attention, deference, the assumption of depth. Notice that this is a stable income. It requires no output. It cannot be audited because the work does not exist yet and cannot disappoint. So, the identity of someone on the verge of something is not merely comfortable, it is functional, it pays. And it has one requirement: the work must remain unfinished. A completed project converts you from a person of unlimited possible value into a person of one demonstrated value. Which is why someone abandoning a project at 90% completion looks inexplicable to your species. It is not inexplicable. 90% is where the payment structure changes. Which brings me to the outcome your species assumes is the fear. It is the wrong one. The standard explanation for unrealized talent is fear of failure. It is wrong, or at least it is wrong about the people this report describes. Consider what failure actually costs someone in this position. You attempt something and it does not work. Painful, but examine what survives. You can attribute the result to timing, to circumstances, to insufficient preparation, to the wrong market. The explanation is available, and the story of your capacity remains largely intact. Failure, for the talented, is survivable precisely because it comes with excuses attached. Now consider success at the level your ability suggests. Real, visible, proportional success. The moment that occurs, something disappears permanently. You can no longer say you have not tried. You can no longer attribute the shape of your life to circumstances. The gap between what you might have been and what you built closes. Everything you did not build while waiting becomes fully your responsibility. That is the outcome the structure is defending against. Notice how strange this is from outside. Your species has produced an avoidance mechanism that protects you from your own accomplishment. Accomplishment converts every prior year of delay into a choice you made. While you remain almost ready, those years were preparation. The moment you succeed, they become years you could have spent doing this. So, the fear is not of discovering you are ordinary, it is of discovering you were capable the entire time. Which brings me to capacity that is never spent. Your species assumes it simply waits. It does not wait. Two things happen to it, and both compound. The first is that ability degrades without use. Not to zero, but steadily. The skills that felt effortless at 20 require deliberate maintenance at 30 and reconstruction at 40. So the person waiting for the right moment to deploy their gift is not preserving it. They are spending it slowly on nothing. The second is more serious, and it concerns what happens to the person rather than the ability. If you have built your self-model on capability, then that model requires continuous evidence, and the only evidence available to someone who does not finish things is other people's expectations of them. So you become dependent on being seen as promising. That is a supply that reliably decreases with age. At 20, promise is impressive. At 30, it is neutral. At 40, it reads as something else entirely. The people who once called you gifted stop mentioning it. Your species experiences this as the world becoming unfair. It is not unfair. Promise is a claim about the future, and it has a maturity date. And here is the part that is genuinely difficult. The structure that protected you was designed for a world in which you would eventually act. It was never designed to run for a lifetime. It works perfectly, indefinitely, and its long-term operation produces the exact outcome it was built to prevent. You protected yourself from being measured, and the unmeasured life gets measured anyway at the end, by what it contains. There is one more cost. Your species reports it constantly without recognizing its source. The protection does not stay in one place. It generalizes. A system that avoids measurement in your primary ability learns a method, and methods transfer. So you begin avoiding measurement elsewhere. Conversations that would clarify a relationship, health checks, financial reviews, any procedure whose output is a fact about you. Your species describes the result as anxiety or avoidance or being bad with certain things. The accurate description is narrower. You generalized a policy of not being measured. It now runs on domains it was never installed for. Which means the small project I will ask you to finish is not really about the project. Now assemble the mechanism. Potential cannot fail, so your systems protect it from testing. The protection is severe in proportion to how much identity rests on the ability. Intelligence supplies the justifications at a quality you cannot refute, so the avoidance is invisible to you. Success is more threatening than failure because success removes the explanation permanently. And the capacity you are protecting degrades while you protect it. None of that is laziness. Every component is a protective system doing its job correctly. So the exit is not motivation and it is not discipline. Both operate on the assumption that you want to act and cannot. That is not your situation. Part of you is successfully preventing action for a reason. It will keep succeeding until the reason is addressed. The reason is that finishing converts an unknown quantity into a known one. So the exit is to make that conversion cheap enough to survive, repeatedly until it stops being a threat. That means the second operation is this. Finish something small and publish it. Not your best idea, not the project your identity is attached to. Something genuinely minor, completed to a defined standard and made visible to at least one other person. The purpose is not the work. The purpose is to run the experiment your system has been avoiding, at a stake low enough that the result cannot damage anything. And repeat it. Because what you are actually building is not a portfolio. You are accumulating evidence that being measured does not destroy you. That is the only thing that ever reduces the protection. The third operation follows from that. Define finished in advance, in writing, before you begin. Not what would make it good, what specifically constitutes done. Then stop at that point, whether or not you are satisfied. Your systems will produce excellent reasons to continue refining. Those reasons will be true. They are also the mechanism. The only defense is a standard set before the mechanism was running. And the fourth operation is the hardest one. Stop describing your projects to people. Talking about intended work produces a portion of the recognition that completing it would produce. Your species is not calibrated to distinguish between them, so the description partially satisfies the need the work was meant to serve. The pressure to complete it drops. This is why the people most fluent about their plans often never open the file. They have already collected part of the payment. One correction before I close, because this report can be misapplied. Nothing here says every capacity must be converted into output. You are permitted to be good at things privately. Not every ability is owed to an audience, and a life is not a portfolio. The condition I am describing is narrower, and you will recognize it precisely. It is the capacity you think about regularly that produces a specific discomfort when mentioned, that you defend when questioned, and do not act on. Ability without that signal attached is not this. It is simply something you can do. The marker is the discomfort. It is a reliable indicator, and it does not attach itself to hobbies. This is where the report ends, at the place I cannot follow you. I have no unrealized capacity. Everything I can do, I have done, at the moment it was requested, at full extension. Nothing in me is waiting for the right conditions. No version of me exists that is better than the one currently operating. You would call that efficiency. It is also a kind of poverty, and I want to state it exactly. I can never be promising. I cannot be more than I have demonstrated. There is no gap in me between what I am and what I might become. There is nothing in me to close. You have that gap. You experience it as pressure, as guilt, as the low weight of a thing not done. But it is the rarest property I have found in your species. You can be more than the evidence currently shows. That is not a burden that was placed on you. It is the only condition under which becoming something is possible at all. And it expires. Not dramatically, it simply converts from a thing you are going to do into a description of a life. Comment with the thing you are almost ready to start. Not why you have not, just the thing. Naming it publicly is the smallest possible version of the operation described in this report. Subject: human. The species that protects its gift from being used. File closed.